Hello, 6th grade. I would like you to know I am now a pro at YouTube videos because I've done like 5 for the 4th grade. They're coming at you or coming at them tomorrow. So here's yours. We're starting with chapter 6. Mrs. Hummel was there the other day and she did 6-1 with you, chapter 6, lesson 1, and she started chapter 6, lesson 2. What I'm going to do is do a real quick review of chapter 6, lesson 1, and move into chapter 6, lesson 2, and then you'll do some work on that on Wednesday, okay? So, that hand coming at you, that's my camera person. And my camera person has decided that you all need to guess who he or she is. So you can email me with your guess, and I will find some way to reward anyone who gets it right. Maybe I'll like send you candy or something. I can't do that. I'll just put your names down. We can have candy when we come back. All right. So when you were there with Mrs. Hummel, we worked on what we call prime factorization. And we did that in our daily review on, what is today? Tuesday. We did that in the daily review on Tuesday, and it's in the daily review again tomorrow. So prime factorization means that we first make a factor tree. So I'm just going to go over it real quick with you so that everybody's on the same page. It looked pretty good in the daily review, but let's do it. So 36, I want you to find the prime factorization of 36. So I need to find 2 factors, and they can be any 2 factors. It doesn't matter which one. So I'm going to use 2 and 18. Now, 2 is prime. Remember, prime means that it only has 2 factors, 1 and itself. There are no other factors for 2 other than 1 and 2. So this is prime. So I'm going to circle that. I'm getting distractions in the back of the camera. I'm going to circle that. And I'm going to come here because 18 is what we call composite. So remember, prime is any number greater than 1 that only has 2 factors. 2 is prime, 3 is prime, 5 is prime, 7 is prime, and so on. Composite means that it has more than 2 factors. So the number 4 is composite because it has 1, 2, and 4 as its factors. And then of course, 6, any even number is going to be composite other than 2. 8 is here. 9 is here. They don't have to be even. 9 has 1, 3, and 9 as its factors. So I prime factorize, do my factor tree until I get to all prime numbers. So I'm going to come here to the 18 and do 2 times 9. 2 is prime, so I'm circling it. 9 is composite, so I find my 2 factors, and that's 3 and 3. 3 is prime, so here are all of the prime numbers that make up the prime factorization of 36. Now, in our daily review, most of you wrote those out. So you said, let's see where I'm going to do it. I'm going to move my green heart up here. I'm going to do it in red. Most of you did this, 2 times 2 times 3 times 3, because in our daily review, there's no way to do exponents. But a couple of you thought to use the caret, which was ingenious. I would not have even thought of it. I was very proud of you, very impressed. So this is fine for prime factorization, but prime factorization should actually look like this. 2 squared, 2 times 2, times 3 squared. So when we write this on our daily review on the computer, you're going to do 2 caret 2, which means 2 raised to the 2nd power, times 3 caret 2, 3 raised to the 2nd power. If this freaks you out, makes you go, what? I will accept this on the computer for now. But when you write it, I want this. When you write it on like a test, anything handwritten, it should look like this. In Word, you can make superscripts and subscripts, but we can't do it on Rediger. So this is how we're going to do it for now. Okay? So this is prime factorization. You need to know what a prime number is, you need to know what a composite number is, you need to know your factors and your facts, your multiplication facts, that's helpful. And then you get down to all prime numbers, you write them either in this form or this form. This can also be this on Rediger. Okay? I think that's it. We call this whole thing a factor tree. We call the whole thing prime factorization, and we talked about prime and composite, so we're good. So that was all of lesson 6.1. So I'm going to move on to lesson 6.2, which is finding what we call the greatest common factor. So that was prime factorization. Greatest common factor means we have to find all of the factors of one number, all of the factors of the second number, and then choose the greatest factor that they have in common. So let's use 12 and 20. So the first thing we have to do is list the factors. That's different than prime factorization. When we list the factors, we list all of the numbers that have 12 as a multiple, that are factors of 12. Okay, so obviously 1 is a factor of 12 and its partner number is 12, 1 times 12. 2 is a factor of 12, and we talked about our divisibility rules on Friday. 2 is a factor of 12 because it's even. 2 and 6. So 1 and 12 are partners, 2 and 6 are partners. 3 is a factor of 12, 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 is divisible by 3, so 12 is divisible by 3. So that was that other divisibility rule that we talked about for 3s. You add the digits. If the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, then the number itself is divisible by 3, okay? So 3 and its partner is 4. So those are all the factors of 12, written from least to greatest, but you can see here how they relate. And 1 and 12 are partners. 1 times 12 is 12, 2 times 6 is 12, 3 times 4 is 12. I'm going to do the same thing with 20. 1 and 20. 2 and 10. 3 is not a factor of 20. You can't count by 3 and get to 20. 4 and 5, and that's it. So those are my factors of 20. If you want to relate them, in 4th grade we call it the rainbow. 1 and 20 are partners, 2 and 10 are partners, 4 and 5 are partners. So now I look at these lists of factors and I choose common factors. So 2 is a common factor, and I keep going. 4 is a common factor, keep going, that's it. So 4 would be my greatest common factor. We call that GCF, greatest common factor equals 4, okay? And then I can use 4, the greatest common factor, to simplify fractions, which we'll get to later, but 4 will come in handy. All right, there's a little shortcut that you can use for greatest common factor using the factor tree. So if I do a factor tree for 12 and a factor tree for 20, okay? So my factor tree for 12, 2 times 6. 6 is composite, so I'm going to keep going until I find prime numbers. So here's my factor tree for 12. So prime factorization for 12 is, let's see how I can do this where you can see it. Prime factorization for 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. Prime factorization for 20. So I'm going to do 2 times 10. and then 2 times 5. So prime factorization for 20, camera person, can you see down this level? Okay, good. Prime factorization for 20 is 2, 2, and 5. So then what you, there's our person. So then what you're actually going to do is you're going to choose factors that show up in both the 12 and the 20. So I'm going to take this 2, they show up in both, and I'm going to take the 2 here, they show up in both, and I multiply them. So I'm going to take the 2 times the 2, and I have found the greatest common factor this way. Greatest common factor of 12 and 20 was 4. Remember when we listed the factors and we got to 4 as our greatest common factor? Here's another way you can come up with the greatest common factor, is by finding the prime factorization, listing them, and then looking at where we have things in common, and we multiply and get the greatest common factor that way. Fun little shortcut. You don't need to use it, but it's helpful. What I would like you to do is look in your workbooks, and I do not have my workbook with me, so I'm going to ask you to find lesson 6 or chapter 6, lesson 2 in your workbook. Chapter 6, lesson 2. And I want you to do both pages of chapter 6, lesson 2. And what I'm going to do is get into school tomorrow, and I'm going to get my teacher's manual because all I have is my textbook. So I'm going to get actually I don't need my teacher's manual, I need my workbook. So I'm going to get my workbook, and I will have the answer key for you. And I will put the answer key as a picture up in Rediker or on email. And then you can check your workbook. And then you can email me with questions. And my next video will be answering some of the questions. Okay? I will also make a second YouTube video, and that video will have me doing all of the workbook questions so that you can see those. That's my plan for now. It could change a little bit, but that's what I'm thinking for now. Okay? So on Wednesday, March 19th, your job is to do workbook, chapter 6, lesson 2. Some of you might already have it finished. Chapter 6, lesson 2, you're going to do all of that work, and then check up on Rediker so that you can get the answer key, and then check your book. And then we'll go from there. Okay? All right. Good luck. Oh, there's our camera person. Good luck, good luck. I miss you all. And, if you have questions on any of the daily review, email me. I tried, anybody who turned it in so far, I emailed you back with what your mistakes were and why you got something wrong. There were a couple people who forgot their magic zero in multiplication. There were a couple people who didn't line up their decimals correctly. And a couple of you who, as you were doing your order up operations, you started off really well, and then when you got to the second or third line, you just went from left to right, and you forgot to look for multiplication and division first, and then the addition and subtraction. So of course, parentheses and exponents come before multiplication and division, but those you guys get really well. You do those well. It's when you get down to a couple levels and you have just all operations across, and you like to take those first 2 numbers. You can't take the first 2, you have to look and see, start on the left and say, do I have any multiplication or division? And find it, and that gets done first. Then bring everything else down, look again from left, do I have any multiplication or division? And do that first, okay? All right, so chapter 6, lesson 2, workbook pages. And a daily review will be coming at you tomorrow. I already have it finished, so that'll post tomorrow in the morning. Do that too. Don't freak out about time and getting things done in a certain amount of time. If you can get this done tomorrow, that will be helpful as we move forward. But the YouTube videos will be there so you can kind of work on your own pace. Okay? All right. Take care, everybody. I will see you later.